Morning. Today we are going to talk about our last set of topics. So the big idea that I'd like to share with you in our final series of lectures about web programming is how to connect JavaScript code that you have running in the front end to Python code you have running in the back end. So the two big ideas we're going to talk about in these series of lectures are Ajax. So Ajax is a JavaScript technology that will send HTTP requests to your backend Python code for processing. And then we're also going to talk a little bit about something called JSON. And JSON is the vehicle for transmitting data between the front end code running JavaScript and the back end. So they both speak using JSON, so the front end can send some request information to the back end using a JSON data format, and then the back end can transmit results back using a JSON format. We're just going to try to use the code we've been working with so far during the semester, which is basically our book voter application. So here is our book voter application, and I'm just going to log in as myself. Whoops, let's go back here and try that again. Bob, CS Rocks 55. All right, so there you've got a list of books that you can vote for. So what I want to do is I want to go to the back end and I want to modify this so that we return two lists, a list of votes in a table, and then also a list of votes in a list of votes in a table, and then a list of votes that will be returned by an Ajax request and a JSON response coming back for that list of votes. So we're not going to vote for a book this time. We're just going to return the list of votes, and then we're going to process those list of votes using Ajax. Okay. Process the same list of votes using Ajax. Okay, so how are we going to do this? Well, let's bring up here we go. Let's go to the templates library, and we're going to look at our survey.html file. All right, so this is pretty simple, right? We've got a form, we have a list of books that we're iterating through, that we're getting from the back end, and then we've got a submit button that allows you to vote for books. So we're going to modify this a little bit. All right, so the modification is going to be as follows. So I'm going to duplicate the form, hitting Control Space. That lets me do cut and paste. Control W cuts, Control Y paste, and we're going to do Control Y again. All right, so we're duplicating the behavior of the form here. And I'm going to say that this form here is, we're going to call this, we'll call this a regular form. And we'll call this a regular survey. So we have an action that's a regular survey. And the method, whether it's get or post, really doesn't matter because we're not actually going to do any submit here other than triggering the regular survey action. So when I do this, it's going to go to the back end. If I hit the submit button, it's going to go to the back end, and it's going to look for the app root called regular survey. Now, the expectation is that the app root regular survey is going to populate a books collection, and then I can iterate through the books in the books collection and list them here as radio buttons. But I don't know, maybe I'll make this a table instead. There's a reason why I'm going to make it a table, and that has to do with the fact that later we're going to operate on this collection of books as if it's a full table. So, all right, here's the table, and we're going to create a T head. Let's do this T head. And we're going to put some headers here. So we've got, oops, looks like we're going to do the title first. We'll do the author next. We'll do the ISBN number of the book next. And we'll do the number of votes for the book as the final. So we'll have a table that has that set of headers in the first row so we can know what we're looking at. All right, and then we'll do a T body, and that's going to consist of a row with the following. All right, so for each row, we're going to iterate through our books. All right, and each book is going to have some pieces of data. So the data that we're going to grab from each book is the book ISBN. We'll get the order right in a second. The book title. The book author. And the book votes. Got a little error there. Let's get rid of that. And then the book votes. All right, so that ends our row. And then we end our for loop. Okay, we have a submit button, but I'm going to give this a value of regular. There's a lot of fields here, but we don't really need most of them. So we'll say type equals submit, value equals submit. Right, we'll call this regular submit. Okay, cool. So that's our first one. Now I made a copy of it here, but I think what I'm going to do is let's test this and see if anything got messed up here. All right, let's see. I want to make sure you can see that pretty clearly, so I'll zoom out a little bit and just expand this a little bit. Okay, so I just converted this form into a table that lists the books. We don't have the order right here, so let's get the order right. So the title and the author are going to go first. Using that control space thing again. Control W, control Y. There we go. So title, author, ISBN, votes. All right, and let's see. I'd like to get that there, and it looks like I need to end my body as well. And end my table. And end my table. Okay, great. So we now have a form which contains a table. Inside the table, there is a title header with title, author, ISBN, and votes. And then we iterate through all of the books in the back end using Flask, and the Flask code will call the DAO to collect up the books like we've done in the past, in past lectures. And then we're going to iterate through those books, looking at and putting the book title, author, ISBN, and votes to line up with title, author, ISBN, and votes as separate rows. So we should see a whole bunch of rows. And then I have a submit button. And what I've set the submit button to do is if you click on regular submit, if you click on the submit button, it just does a refresh of the web page by going to regular survey, which is going to be our app root in our Python code. So let's take a look at the Python code now. So Python code has an app root for survey. That's how things were working in our previous example. So I'm going to change this to regular survey. And we've got some error field information. We've got the books and then book DAO. And then we're doing the special select by ISBN stuff, but we're actually going to skip that because I don't want to do anything really other than returning all the books in this example. So we're not really allowing the user to choose a book just yet. All right, cool. And in this example, we don't really need results either, so we're just going to get rid of that. Okay, so basically, regular survey gets all the books from the data store and does the render template of survey.html, which is perfect. We can get rid of that comment to clean it up a little bit more. Okay. All right, well, let's test it out. I just saved this, yes. And if we go, I can see that it's running. That's great. And if we go here and I say login, let's log in as Bob, CS Rocks 55, and do a submit. Ruh-roh. Oh, it doesn't like survey. And that's because, well, let's take a look at the code. I just changed a few things around, so it doesn't surprise me that return survey right here. If we have a valid login, we're going to return regular survey. Okay, great. All right, let's try this again. There's my login. I'll submit. All right, so now we have a table that appears, and it says title, author, ISBN, votes, and there's a button that says regular submit. If I click on regular submit, the page refreshes. You can see that happening. The page refreshes, and all of the books appear there. Super. Okay, now what I want to do is I want to add a second table, and what that second table is going to give us is a way of getting the books from the backend using Ajax and JSON instead of just the regular framework that is available to us through Flask. All right, so let's take a look at the code first for our HTML. All right, so I'm going to duplicate this form. And create a second form. And this one, I'm going to call, instead of calling it regular form, I'm going to call it Ajax form. Because we're going to use Ajax to do our processing. All right, now in this form, there is no action. because all the work is going to be done by the jQuery JavaScript code that we're going to write. But I do have to give some IDs out in order to make this work. So we're going to have an ID for the form. We're going to have an ID also for the table. So I'm going to call this Ajax table. And looking at my notes here, it looks like yeah, now we've got our button down here, and we're going to call it Ajax submit. As our value. I'm not sure we need an ID there. We might come back and do that. I don't think we need it, at least not right now. Okay, so when you click on the submit button now here, it shouldn't really do anything right now. The default behavior is to just go back to the page that you're currently on. So it should just refresh just like the original page. So let's try it out. All right, we're gonna refresh this. Okay, now we see a regular submit and Ajax submit. If I click Ajax submit, it just refreshes like the regular page. All right, so now what we want to do though is we want to change it so that when you click on the Ajax submit button, what it does is it talks directly to an app root in the back end on Python and does not refresh the page. Now, why would that be useful? Well, it's useful as a demonstration to show you how Ajax works. So that's one reason why it would be useful. But the other reason why it's useful is that going back to the web browser to refresh an entire page, if you could imagine that this page has lots of text and information and stuff that's been downloaded and data that's been downloaded, and all you needed to do is refresh one tiny table in all of this information. Refreshing the entire page would take a lot of work, a lot of processing, and also a lot of data that could be transmitted. But if I just want to click on this little button right here, boop, and I just want to have that little button just populate this small table out of all of the data that I have here, that could be very useful. All right, so let's try and see if we can get this. Let's try and see if we can get this to work. So the first thing we're going to do is we are going to modify the code that exists let's do this. I'm just thinking the right order to do it. Let's set something up here in book footer. So we'll set up a second app root for our Ajax survey. All right, and we're going to call this Ajax survey. And we are not going to return a render template because we're not rendering templates. I'm going to do something called JSONify, and I'm going to return a list that contains the following. Some data, data's pretty generic, so yeah, I'll call it data. And hello there. Okay, just indicating that this worked. Okay. So what did I just do here? Well, I set up an app root to handle any kind of Ajax requests that come from the front end that target this particular app root. And then I said, hey, what I'd like you to return is some data. So I told you a little bit earlier that Ajax communicates using JSON. JSON is not complicated. It's basically a series of name value pairs which you can use to communicate data across the board. All right, so it's just name value pair. So here's the name data, and here's the value, hello there. So we're going to look in our JavaScript code after we do make a call to this app root Ajax survey, and we're going to see that in fact the JavaScript code got executed, that this backend code in Python got executed, and we're going to see this data hello there get returned. What we actually want to return though is all of the books that are in the data store, but we're going to leave that for a little bit later because there's a little bit of special work we have to do to make that happen. Okay, so that takes care of Ajax survey. And now let's go back to our HTML just to take a look. All right, now what I want to have happen is when the submit button here gets clicked, let's take a look at it. When the submit button here gets clicked, some JavaScript code gets executed, which sends an Ajax request back to the Python code. That's going to trigger that Ajax survey app root. All right, to make that work, what I'm going to do is I'm going to edit the file table.js. I guess we could call it survey.js. Let's see. What's it called up here? Oh, it's not in here yet. Okay, so let's create a file called survey.js. All right, so in order to use this file survey.js, we have to access it. And in order to access it, there's a couple of cheesy things that we have to do. So first of all, we're going to add some code. I have a working version of this, so I don't want to type this out because I can make a mistake. So, and you can use the jar file here as your guide. So I have surveycomplete.html. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to grab from this the code that we need to get all this to work. And I'm going to paste that in my survey.html. This is just busy work, basically. Okay. So I'll explain what I have here. The first thing I have here is a little bit of scripting code that defines a global variable called script root. So this is necessary for any JavaScript file that you write using Flask to be discovered and used correctly when you're processing templates like the one we have right here. All right, and so the way it gets used is this special variable, the special script root variable, gets used when we do this URL for static. And this URL for static says, go to the static directory under which the Python code that you're running is executing, and look for the file table.js. I don't like the name table.js, so let's just call this survey.js. All right, I think that's a better name. Now, there's two other script files here. One is the jQuery JavaScript file, and the other is the jQuery UI JavaScript file. So these two files are important because what they do is they give us access to the jQuery library and then the jQuery UI library, which lets us do some cool visual effects. Okay, so not a lot of code here, but you definitely don't want to type this by hand. I would just copy and paste it from my example. All right, okay. Also, I didn't mention what this script root is, right? This IP address, that's the IP address of the machine I'm using. And that's the port number that I'm using to run this code. So you want to type in here in this Javascript root the IP address of the machine that you are using. All right, that's really important. I'm just going to highlight that to make sure you understand that. So you want to make sure that under script root, this IP address, that's the IP address of the machine that you are using. Okay, great. Okay, so we've got that part set up. Now it's time to write some code here. And let's see, I'm gonna look for, I'll do a buffer menu again because I've got stuff sitting in here. And oh, no, I don't have survey.js though. Okay, so let's do this. jQuery templates and static, and we'll call it survey.js. Okay, so the first thing that I want to do here is I want to take a look at, I want to set up just a basic jQuery document.ready function. And what I'd like to do is I'd like to set things up so that when you press submit on the Ajax submit button right here, that we capture that event. So the way you do that, this actually took me a little while to figure out because there's normally when you press submit on a submit button in a form, it triggers the form submission, but I want to disable that because I want to capture it in Ajax, or sorry, capture it in jQuery and then do some processing on it. So what you do is you put the name of the form, and the name of our form is Ajax form, and then you say submit, and then you provide an anonymous function. That's going to get called. This function that these are both event handlers, so I guess I could put, you know, an event handler E in here, an argument E here, but I'm not going to use it. So, all right, so what I'm saying here is when the submit button is pressed, when the Ajax form submit button is pressed, I want this to execute. All right, and so the first thing I want to happen is I want to prevent the default behavior. Okay, that e.prevent default, that prevents the regular form submission that would happen if you press submit on the submit button for a form, because I don't want it to do a regular form submission because I want to control all of this. Okay, and then I just want to say alert caught submit event, and that's it. I just want to make sure this works. We're going to build this up in stages. All right, so that takes care of that. Then that takes care of that submit. And this takes care of that function form, and that takes care of the document ready. Okay. Yes. Sure. Okay. So, did this work? I don't know. Let's find out. So there's a bunch of tools we're going to use to figure out if this worked. So starting out here, let's just put the URL in and see if we at least have the login working. All right, Bob, CSRox55, submit. So that bodes fairly well, but the question is, did it actually find the HTML that I submitted, the new HTML that we just updated, or is it caching in the browser? This sometimes can be a problem. So the way to figure all that out and to force the behavior, force it to reread files that may have changed on the back end is to bring up developer tools. And then let's take a look at sources. And under sources, we have survey.js, oh, and login. Huh. That's cool. Or no, let's go to elements. All right, so elements will show us the HTML page as it is being rendered in the browser. And so we can see that it's looking pretty good. That header, the JavaScript root things, that's something that we just wrote. All of these includes here look correct. And it's looking pretty good. The regular form looks a little weird. It's missing. I don't know why that's a little weird. The table looks okay. Oh, that's the header. I don't know why it's not showing us the header information, but or that th body information. That's a little strange. I'll have to go take a look at that. But anyway, the rows for the header are there. The rows for the body are there. Maybe that's just a typo. It shouldn't be th body. It should just be t body. Okay. And then I've got the same issue going on over here with the form. Table, header, body. Great. Okay, awesome. So if we go to sources, you can see that there is a file called survey.js. That's our JavaScript file, and there's all the code for the JavaScript. Now, what we can do here is let's try it and see if it works. Oh, I've got a little red X here. One error. Let's see what the console says. Failed to load resource. Oh, right. It didn't load the favicon.ico, which is a little icon that'll appear up here. So if you create one of these ico files, which you could, you can get a little custom icon that appear up here. And there's a lot of websites that will create these. So if you Google favicon creator, the websites will show up. It'll let you upload an image. It'll convert the image into this ICO file, and then you can include it in your web application. All right, so, well, let's just try it. I'm gonna click Ajax submit and let's see what happens. Oh, look, Ajax submit, and now it says caught submit event. Fantastic. Other than that, catching that submit event, nothing really is happening here. So that's good. So let's go back to our code then. And I'm telling you that th body thing is really bugging me. So I'm gonna take a look and see if we can fix that. So this is probably supposed to be t body and not th body. I'll save that. All right, we saved that. And now let's go here. And we're gonna go to, if we click regular submit, it should refresh the web page. And if we take a look at elements, much better. Looks like I just had a little bug in there with a bad element name. Okay, fantastic. All right, so what to do next? Well, what I'd like to do next is I would like to make an Ajax request to the back end that says, hey, back end, would you get me the books? So that's what I want to have happen. So let's see, I'm just going to show you what I mean here visually. So the section I just collected, right, which is the Ajax table that contains a list of books with a header, I want to get that collection of books from the back end using Ajax. All right, so when I click on this, we're not going to refresh the entire web page. We're going to make a special request to the back end using Ajax. It'll trigger the app root, and instead of responding with HTML, we're actually going to respond with data. All right, so to try to get this to work, the first pass of trying to get this to work, what we're going to do is we're going to get into our JavaScript page. I don't know why I changed that to a capital B. And let's go to survey.js, and we're going to just do this. We know that that alert's working. We can get rid of that. And let's write a little bit of code here. So the code is going to be $.get. So a $.get says make an HTTP GET request, but we're going to make it an Ajax GET request. The route that we're going to use on the back end is Ajax survey. Now, why did I say that? Well, if we look at book footer, you see we have the app root Ajax survey here. So that's the route that I'm going to use. That'll collect up all the books, and then we're just going to send a hello there at first, but eventually we want to get all the books back. All right, so whoops. All right, survey.js. All right, so, and then we're going to say, okay, so that's the GET request. That's all you need to do to say, do the GET. The next thing you need to do is say, hey, when the GET returns with data, give us, I want the data. The data will consist of two arguments. The first argument is the variable that will hold the JSON version, the Ajax friendly version of the data that the backend wants to transmit to the front end. Now remember, it's not sending HTML here, it's just going to send just basically raw data. I'm going to call the data books. Now, it's not really, our initial pass, it's not going to be books. It's going to, well, you know what, I'll just call it data for now. We'll change it to books later. Okay, we'll just call it data. So whatever the backend sends us, that's data. And then status, some kind of status code to let us know that things worked or didn't work. Okay, so that is our code. So what I'd like to do is I'd like to do an alert, and I'm going to have the alert just print out the data. And that's it. Again, we're just building this up in pieces. I just want to see that the code for this get works, and that we're able to execute an Ajax function. So that's it. So that's what the front end's going to do. Now in the back end, let's go take a look at the back end again. It would be nice to get just a little bit of feedback that we got called here. And so what I'm going to do is I'm just going to say print got called by the got an Ajax call. Okay, cool. So let's go over here and we'll just refresh the page by clicking regular submit. Let's check our sources to make sure that our survey.js page picked up our change. Yep, there's our get Ajax survey, our call to the app root on the back end. And there's our function that will be our event handler that'll get called when data comes back. And there's our code to handle that data. Perfect. All right, so let's try Ajax submit and see what happens. Boop. Huh. So we got an internal survey error, internal server error, but you could see that when I did that click, it did make a call to Ajax survey. Let's take a look at the call and what happened. So if you look right here, it says, hey, I got an Ajax call, and then it barfed. And it barfed because I didn't do a good job of setting up this JSON data. Okay, so let's try it again. I actually made a little bit of a change. I paused the screen recorder so I could do a little bit of research, and it turned out that I had two problems in my code. but when you get this code, you won't have these problems. So the first problem I had up here was I was missing an import from Flask import JSONify. So that's the first thing I was missing. The second problem I had was I had the JSON message done incorrectly. Here it said data, and the code was getting mad because it said data is not a variable that I know about. So I actually should have put it in quotes. And I don't want you to get confused between the variable data or anything on the back end and anything on the front end. So I'm going to call this message. Okay. So I told you that the way JSONify works, it's very simple. It's simply key value pairs. So the key is message, the value is hello there. And you can have as many of these as you want in a big list, and you can have things nested inside of things, and you can build as complex of a data structure as you want. But for right now, just to keep it simple, we just have a single key value pair, message with the value hello there. Okay, so that's what's going to be sent back to the caller. Now, if I go over here and look at my code, I have cleverly set up a breakpoint on line 6 of the survey.js code. So when we make the survey request of the backend, when the event handler that handles the response from the survey request gets called, what we're going to get is we're going to do an alert that prints out the data. All right, but I also want a breakpoint here so I can investigate what's going on. And I will show you over here in the watch area the data that gets returned from the caller. Okay, so let's give it a try. So we'll just do a regular submit first, refresh everything. Then I'm going to go here and click Ajax submit. And I just want to pause for a second and consider this awesomeness. All right, so we did the Ajax submit. What that meant was that it triggered the execution of this app route because that's what this code said to do. Go to Ajax survey on the back end and execute the code. Then it triggered the execution of this event handler, which gets called when the back end finishes executing the front end's request. That happens when this return JSONify gets executed. And we're just JSONifying the key value pair of message and hello there. Now let's take a look over here. I put a breakpoint here on line 6. That's exactly where we stopped. If you take a look at this, we have a data value. That's the thing that got passed back in from the back end. And the data value is a key value pair, message, and hello there. Ta-da! So, kind of cool. It's basically like we've shown how the front end and the back end are connected. Now, I wanted to show you a cool thing you can do with this watch. You can add other variables. So like if I want to check out the status is the other variable right here that was sent in as part of the event handler when the back end responded. I can also just put my cursor over it too. But now I can see that the status was success. Okay, cool. And I'm going to let this finish executing. And you can see it says, blah, 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 says object. Not super helpful, but I know that that alert got called. All right, cool. That's not exactly what I wanted to do though, right? What I wanted to do is I wanted to populate the table with the results that come from the back end. And I'm going to do that in an interesting way. So what I want to do now is I want to basically erase the table that's here, the rows that are in the table, and then start populating the rows with whatever comes back from this Ajax submit. So there's some work we have to do. So first we can do some front end work just to erase the table. All right, so what's that front end work going to be? Let's go to the front end. There's so many cool things that you can do once you get comfortable with jQuery, and so I'm just going to show you some of them. So one thing that we can do is we can say $pound Ajax table. So now we're identifying the table, and we're going to find everything that's in T body. Oh, I got to get that quote right here. So all of the rows under T body, that's the data rows, and we're going to detach them. That will make them disappear. All right, so let's do that first. And just see what happens. So I do an Ajax submit. Let's do a refresh. And now I'm going to do an Ajax submit. Okay, so I lost all of the data. All right. Now what I'd like to replace that lost data with is the data that's in that data that's coming from the back end. And so I think what I'm going to do first is I'm just going to replace it with a single book. All right. So I'm going to change this to book. And I'm going to say dollar Ajax table append, and I'm going to append the following. A row with, let's just try this as an experiment. Let's just see if we can get the append to work. So tr, and then we're going to put in a book title. And the title is going to be, start out with book title, and we'll call it the thing. We'll call it it, because that's a nice Stephen King book. And we've got a few rows to do here. So we've got the title, the author, the ISBN, and the votes. And then we're going to append, end the row. Okay, cool. So title, it, author is Stephen King. The ISBN, 4567. Oh, let's do 9999. And the number of votes, let's give it 42 votes. We're just hard coding everything here. So that closes the append, and the rest is taken care of for us. Okay, super. So we've updated that. Let's do a refresh and make sure that we get everything. Now you'll notice that the second table appeared. That's not magical. It appeared because I did a full refresh of the page. And if you remember that the full refresh of the page triggers the template library in the back end to render everything in this second table as well. All right, so if I did everything right, then when I click Ajax submit, you can see that only a single, well, one thing is the table got wiped out, and then a single book, Stephen King, appears. Now, if I click the submit again, you'll notice that, nothing appears to be happening, but it actually is doing the submit on the back end. We can see that by looking at the debugging code that's over here. I'll just put I'll put that over here. Maybe bring this web browser down a little bit and lift it up. Okay, so you can see it, look down here, and when I click that Ajax submit, you can see those timestamps changing as I'm clicking the submit, and that's because that submit is triggering a call to the back end, and it's saying, got an Ajax call. All right, cool. Okay, so now that's not really the data that's in the back end. I'd like to have the back end give me its data. And so how do I do that? Well, why don't we work on just getting a single book sent from the back end, and then we can deal with multiple books in a more clever fashion. So let's change this append. Whoops, I guess we have to go back here to change the append. We're going to call this book. Here, we're going to say, if we do this right, book dot title book dot author book dot ISBN and book dot votes. So we're going to return a single book from the back end. Okay. All right, so the book we're going to return from the back end, we'll just hard code the whole thing to start out with, and then we'll get it to work in a little bit. Okay, so we can get rid of got an Ajax call because we know that's working. All right, so let's set up our book here. So our book is going to have a title, and the title is going to be it. Oh, let's make it different. So there's another Stephen King book, Creepshow. That's fun. All right, and we've got an author. Stephen King. We've got an ISBN. Uh, 8888, and let's give it votes. And the number of votes is, well, let's say the number of votes is 12. Okay, cool. So that's what we're going to return. And let's see, whoops, let's see what happens here. So I'm going to click refresh to vote, or, well, we can click it here. Okay. Oh, it looks like I have a little error here. And that is because of what? Oh, I forgot to put a plus there. Okay, so let's go back to the code here. Okay. A little tedious there, but I wanted to get that corrected. Okay. Let's go back to survey.js and fix that plus. Okay, that's saved. And we'll go here, do a little refresh. That all looks good. So I'm going to put a breakpoint right here. Okay, and so what I'm looking for is when we return from making the Ajax call to the backend, we should have a book if we've done the JSONify correctly. So let's see what happens. Okay, so we're here at line 7. Doesn't look like there are any errors. That's good. We're going to change the name of this data field to book. And it's a book object. It has an author, ISBN 888, title, Creepshow, votes 12. So if we let this continue, boom, from the back end, we just got Creepshow, Stephen King, 888, 12. Awesome. All right, let's take a look at the back end again. And we'll go to the code that set that up. Awesome. So we did a JSONified version of a book. Now, here's the trick though. Here is books. That is a collection of books. So what we need to do is we need to create a collection of books, not just a single book, but a collection of books. Now there's some clever ways of doing that. So I'm going to show you a super clean way, thanks to the awesome power of Googling, that I found to do this. You're going to be stunned. Okay, so the first thing is we need to write a little bit of code to do something called serialize a book. And all that's doing is basically converting a book from a regular book object into a JSON-friendly book that has title, author, ISBN, votes, okay? So let's go take care of that. All right, so here's what we have so far for our book. Remember, it's super simple. We've got title, author, votes, ISBN. We have this thing called toString. All right, so we're going to create a method called serialize. And this creates a JSONified friendly version of a book. Now, I happen to have the code to do this because I looked it up and I can't remember it. So we're going to I'm just going to grab it. So that's not rocket science. I mean, I could have just written that. So let's go to this is exactly what we would have expected, right? We've got title, author, ISBN, votes, and we're just creating a JSON-friendly version of the book by calling serialize. So we have key value pairs, essentially setting up a dictionary, really. Okay, cool. So that takes care of serialize. Now let's go back to, we'll save that. And let's go back to book voter. And what we're going to do here is we're going to say, let's take the books. We have a collection of books, right? So that's a collection, but we need to convert all the books into a serialized version of the book. So we're going to say serialized or serial books. Equals. Now I could write a for each here, but there's a super clever way of doing this with tight syntax. So here's how it works. I'm going to say book.serialize. And then I'm going to say for book in books. Crazy, but that will work. So this basically does a for book in books and does a book serialize. And every one of those is appended to this list. So it's like a super tight way of creating a list of serialized book objects. So just to repeat, this for book in books is basically like a for loop, right? Getting a book out of books For each of the books in books, we're going to just invoke this one method, book.serialize, and the result of that book.serialize is going to be appended to this list in square brackets. All right, so now we have the serialized books. So now what we want to do with JSONify is take that collection of serialized books and JSONify it and return it to the caller, to the front end. So we're going to say serialized books. Okay, so that'll return this collection of serialized versions of the books that we got from the DAO. All right, cool. So let's take a look at the front end then. Now the front end was expecting a single book, but now it has a collection of books. So what we could do is we could write a for loop that iterates through all of the books that are returned and appends those to the Ajax table, just like we have here. However, there is a clever way of doing this in just basically a single line statement. All right, and it's done using another cool function called map. So I'm going to show you how that works. So it's really quite clever and cool. All right, so we're going to say Ajax table append. So we're going to keep all that code. In fact, we're going to keep this as well, but we just have to do a few extra things here. So we're going to say $.map. So what $.map does is it takes a collection, and here's my collection, books, the books that were returned from the backend right here in this function, which is the event handler that gets called when the backend, the Python code, returns that JSONified collection of the books. All right, so we're going to, for each of the books, we're going to run the following function. Okay, that first argument, book, is sort of like the for each. So for each book in books, this function will get mapped to it. We have an index value here, which is cool, but I don't need to use that. So we know which book we're working on. All right, so the map is, we're going to say result equals, and I just want to do this because I want to build it up in stages so you can see what we end up with. I like to get things lined up because it makes me feel better. It also makes the code a little bit easier to read, I think. Okay, so that's our result. And then we're going to, that shouldn't be there. We're going to return result. And that takes care of our function, our mapping function. Now, there's only one thing we want to do, one extra thing we want to do here. Every one of these mappings that occurs, we want to join together until we have a big collection of books that have been mapped to this function that returns a string. So we're going to end up appending a whole bunch of strings to this Ajax table. All right, that should take care of that append. And then I think we are going to just line this up this way. Okay. So just to be clear about what just happened, what we have here is an append operation that's happening on the Ajax table. So we clear out all of the data rows first, then we append new data rows. Those data rows are given to us, passed into us by this books object, which is going to be a collection of books that's being passed to us from the back end. For each of the books that we receive from the back end, we're going to run this function, and the function gets one of the books in the collection, and then we extract the title, author, ISBN, and votes. We put that in a row, and then we take that row and we append it to the Ajax table, row after row after row. The thing that lets us append a whole bunch of rows to the Ajax table is actually this join. So the map join is going to let us append result after result together until we're finally done, and then that final result gets sent to the Ajax table append. So it's a very tight version of a for loop that creates a big set of table rows and then appends that set of table rows to the table. Okay, well, let's try it out and see if it works. All right, so I'm going to do a refresh again. That's the original table. Now, if it works, it's actually not going to look like anything happened, but I think what I'll do is we've got a breakpoint here so you can see the data. And the data we want to be looking at is books. And it would be helpful to see the status as well. So let's see what happens. Let me see if there's anything else I forgot to do here. I think there might have been one little weird thing with JSONify that I forgot to do. Nope, no, I think I got it. I think I have it all right. Okay, so click Ajax submit. All right, we're paused. Now, we're about to start processing the books that were returned. If you want to see the books that were returned, they're here. This variable books, this argument books, and you can see each of the books. Stephen King, ISBN 1, The Talisman, ISBN 1111, The Talisman, votes 19, etc. So all of the 4 books have been returned, and now we'll process those, and ta-da, there they are. They appear just like over here. But notice if I click regular submit, watch that. You see that? It's taking a little while. Okay. If I click Ajax submit, of course it's paused in the debugger. Let me get rid of that breakpoint. Let's try that again. Ajax submit. It doesn't even look like anything happened, but those rows are being refreshed. It bothered me a little bit that the rows, just knowing that the rows were not being refreshed, or they are being refreshed. You can see that by setting the breakpoint, but it kind of bothered me a little bit. So I thought, hey, why don't I do something kind of cool to demonstrate that these rows here are being refreshed. So the way I did that was I took just a little bit of code from another jQuery, from a jQuery UI thing called animate. So I'm going to show you that code. Let's see. I think I was calling this table complete.js. All right, so I just want to show you the code here. I'm going to grab it and then I'll talk about it, put it in my code. All right. Okay, so the code is going to go right here. After the get, we're going to do this. Whoops. Okay, so after the get, we're going to do this. We're going to have this toggle. And what the toggle is going to do is it's going to do an animate option on the table. So the animate option is just going to change the background color. This is a very nice shade of blue with a background with a white coloring, and then a nice shade of green with a white background. And it takes a second to do the animation. I'm basically saying take a second to do the animation. Okay, now this toggle variable is something that I'm going to declare up at the top. As a global variable, and we're going to set it equal to false. All right, and then we're going to set toggle equal to not toggle. So what this will do is basically we'll switch back and forth between a green background, blue background, then green, then blue, then green. So back and forth until we, just forever. So every time we click on that Ajax form submit button, we'll get that little toggle. And it's just a little visual indication that things are in fact changing. And then this toggle equals not toggle will cause this toggle to change from true to false to true to false. So we'll get that back and forth. Okay, so save that. I think I just saved it. Oh, there we go. Sure. Okay, and then we'll go back here. We'll do a full refresh. Now the initial refresh doesn't activate the event handler for the submit button, for the Ajax submit button. So we didn't see any coloring. But now if I click the Ajax submit button, boom, it changed to blue. All right. That means you didn't see it, but what happened was the entire table got erased. That's what this detach method does. Then all of the results got sent from the back end to the front end, all the table information. It got re-rendered, and then the color was set to, actually the color was set to blue. I think that's the blue coloring. If I click Ajax submit again, now the color is green. All right, blue and then green. How cool is that? So even though it doesn't seem like anything's going on here, we actually are communicating with the back end and getting information and transmitting it. And this coloring helps prove that that's happening. Also setting a breakpoint in here helps that as well. Okay, that's good for part 1.